Marcus Vane had never expected a hero's welcome. After years of fighting on the edges of human space, facing alien fleets that treated humanity as little more than an annoying insect species, he was returning home. The war had been brutal, but humans had survived where others would have perished. And Marcus, a soldier who trusted his instincts more than any protocol, had played his part. He had been everywhere, seen horrors most would never imagine, and yet here he was, walking onto the space station where Earth's representatives were waiting to celebrate his victories. The station itself was a marvel of engineering. Suspended in orbit around a gas giant, it was a swirl of metal, lights, and energy fields, bustling with humans, aliens, and machinery alike. Marcus stepped off the transport shuttle, his boots making firm prints on the metallic floor. Every sound of activity reminded him that life continued despite war, that humans had fought not just to survive, but to thrive. He was met first by the commanders, their expressions polite but tense. Even now, humans and aliens shared uneasy trust. The war had ended, but the scars were everywhere, political, cultural, and emotional. They spoke in clipped tones about his campaigns, the victories, the risks, and the losses. Marcus nodded and answered, careful not to let his emotions show too much. Victory was always a mix of pride and guilt. There were always those left behind, always those whose lives had ended because of decisions he had made. Then came the reward. It was presented with ceremony, a display meant to impress and flatter. The alien coalition, grateful, or perhaps more accurately intrigued, by his human ingenuity, had decided to offer Marcus a gift. The words themselves were strange, almost archaic in their implication. We present you with Lyra as a reward for your victories and your service. She looked at Marcus with sharp intelligence, not fear. Her posture was not that of someone forced to obey. It was the posture of someone evaluating, calculating, trying to understand the world she had been offered. He felt the weight of every eye on them. Aliens and humans alike expected him to take her as a reward, to claim what they believed they had given him. Marcus, however, had never been a man to take what did not belong to him. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "I will not accept this as a gift," he said. The room went silent, the only sound the faint hum of the station's energy fields. "She is not a reward, she is not property. She has a life, a choice, and I will not take that from her or anyone else." Her glowing eyes narrowed, not in fear but in curiosity. "You refuse what your species would consider the greatest prize?" she asked, her voice melodic but carrying an edge of challenge. "Why?" "You will not be my reward because you are not mine. You are your own being, and you deserve to make your own choices. Perhaps your species is not as I expected. You should show respect." She stood beside Marcus, her presence strong but composed. "I choose," she said simply. "I choose to stand with him." He had expected resistance, perhaps even confrontation, but Lyra's decision changed the dynamic entirely. She was not a trophy. She was a partner. Not in the way the aliens imagined, but as an equal, someone capable of her own decisions, her own judgments. The coalition representatives hesitated, exchanging looks that Marcus could not read. Then slowly they backed down, though their displeasure was clear. Marcus did not care. The war had taught him that courage was more than fighting. It was standing by one's principles, even when everyone else expected compliance. As they prepared to leave the station, Marcus and Lyra moved together, not as master and gift, but as companions embarking on an uncertain journey. They had a mission, delivering vital intelligence to Earth about alien movements in the galaxy. But they were also navigating a more delicate mission, understanding each other, learning to trust across the boundaries of species and experience. The first moments were awkward. Lyra asked questions, sharp, insightful, and sometimes uncomfortable. Marcus answered as best he could, sharing the human perspective, not sugarcoating the brutality of war but explaining the reasoning, the strategy, and the ethical dilemmas humans faced. She listened, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the shuttle corridor, processing everything with rapid precision. They were interrupted mid-conversation by the station's automated alerts. Pirates. The sensors indicated small but fast-moving craft approaching. Marcus and Lyra exchanged a glance. This would not be the first threat they faced, nor would it be the last. Humans survived through unpredictability, through improvisation, through thinking in ways others did not. Marcus felt that familiar thrill, that calm readiness. The shuttle launched into space, leaving the station behind. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, a reminder of both the dangers and the possibilities. The pirates came quickly, their ships small and agile, attempting to intercept and disable them. Marcus moved with practiced efficiency, issuing orders to the shuttle's automated systems, adjusting shields, redirecting power, and initiating evasive maneuvers. Lyra assisted, her alien knowledge allowing her to interface with the ship's systems in ways Marcus could not, creating a synergy that neither of them expected. As the skirmish unfolded, Marcus marveled at the unpredictability of the situation. Humans thrived not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they were adaptable, willing to take risks, willing to defy expectations. He saw that same spark reflected in Lyra. She was not just an ally, she was learning, evolving, understanding the human way of facing adversity. Hours later, after the pirates had been outmaneuvered and left far behind, the shuttle stabilized. Marcus leaned back in his seat, exhausted but satisfied. Lyra studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable, then spoke quietly. "You are not like any human I imagined," she said. "You value freedom, choice, and strategy in ways that surprise me. I thought your species only conquered or obeyed. I see now there is more. Responsibility, things that cannot be given or taken away, only respected." The aliens who had offered her as a reward would not forget so easily, and other threats awaited in the vast expanse of space. But he also knew that humans had never backed down when faced with impossible odds. They adapted, they endured, and they overcame. Together, Marcus and Lyra traveled through the galaxy, two beings from entirely different worlds, yet bound by a shared understanding. That freedom was sacred, that courage meant more than strength, and that the human spirit could shine even in the darkest corners of the universe. As the shuttle glided past distant suns and the shadows of planets, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of hope. This was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of danger and full of possibilities. But he was a human soldier, and humans never gave up. He would face whatever came next, and he would do it on his terms, honoring life, choice, and freedom above all else. And in that moment, Marcus realized something he had long suspected. Humanity's greatest weapon was not its fleets or weapons or cunning strategies. It was its spirit, its morality, its ability to stand for what was right, even when the universe expected otherwise. And that was a power that no alien force could ever fully understand or control. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, and Marcus and Lyra traveled onward, ready to face them together, as equals, as allies, and as witnesses to what humanity could achieve when it stayed true to its principles. The journey from the orbital station to the outer edge of human-controlled space was long and quiet, except for the hum of the shuttle's engines and the occasional crackle of communication from distant outposts. Marcus sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls, his mind scanning both star maps and threat assessments. Lyra sat across from him, her alien eyes observing everything with calm precision, noting the patterns of energy and movement that most humans would have missed. "Your species really relies on improvisation," she said after a while, her voice soft but curious. "Even in warfare, you do not always follow protocol. You adapt, you risk. You succeed where others fail. You survive because you embrace it." Sensors had picked up a small fleet moving in their direction, fast and aggressive. Pirates, by the look of it, small but heavily armed, clearly expecting an easy target. Lyra leaned forward, her hands moving across the ship's interface. She analyzed the fleet, calculating trajectories and weaknesses. "They are not professional," she said. "They rely on speed and numbers rather than strategy. You should be able to outmaneuver them if you act carefully." Lyra suggested adjustments, rerouting power to shields at just the right moments, and Marcus executed each maneuver with precision. Despite the danger, Marcus found himself appreciating the partnership. Humans were clever, but humans with insight from other species, especially one like Lyra, could become nearly unstoppable. She was learning, adapting, and thinking faster than many trained soldiers he had worked with. He could see the beginnings of a bond, not based on obligation or reward, but on respect and shared survival. Hours passed in tense engagement. The pirates attempted to surround them, but Marcus predicted their movements, countering each attack. Lyra's input proved crucial. She noticed patterns that even the shuttle's systems couldn't fully account for. Together, they worked as a team, a human and an alien, facing threats that neither could have managed alone. Finally, after a prolonged skirmish, the pirates were forced to retreat. Marcus set the shuttle on a steady course, allowing the adrenaline to fade. Lyra exhaled, a sound almost human in its relief. "You fight differently from what I expected. You do not rely solely on strength or technology. You rely on understanding the mind, predicting choices, and taking calculated risks. It is cleverness, flexibility, and the willingness to act when it counts that matters." The recognition from someone like Lyra was meaningful. She came from a culture that measured worth in obedience and skill. For her to respect choice and freedom as humans did was a rare acknowledgement. Their path to Earth took them through systems on the edge of human influence, places that were still wild and poorly charted. They encountered empty stations, derelict ships, and strange phenomena, gravity wells, plasma storms, and shifting nebulae that played tricks on sensors. Each challenge tested their cooperation, their ingenuity, and their ability to trust one another. At one point, a rogue asteroid storm threatened to crush the shuttle. Marcus recalculated their trajectory, factoring in Lyra's input about the gravitational pull and density of the storm. He piloted the shuttle through narrow gaps between massive rocks, engines straining, sweat on his brow. Lyra manipulated the ship's shields, focusing energy on the points of highest pressure. Together, they emerged unscathed, though shaken. "That was impressive," Lyra said, her voice quiet but filled with admiration. "Humans would not have survived that without instinct, risk-taking, and cooperation. I see now why your species thrives even in hostile space." "You learn fast." Marcus answered honestly, telling her of victories and losses, of strategies and mistakes, of moments that tested the limits of endurance and ethics. Lyra listened, absorbing the information, sometimes commenting in ways that surprised him. "You are capable of great empathy, yet you wage war," she said once, her voice contemplative. "How do you reconcile the two?" "It is what makes humans different from other species who fight blindly, or without regard for consequence." Lyra began to trust Marcus' judgment, not simply as a soldier, but as a human being who valued life, freedom, and choice above all else. Marcus, in turn, recognized her intelligence, her independence, and her willingness to learn. She was no reward, no prize, no tool. She was a companion, and together they represented what could happen when humans and aliens worked as equals rather than as master and subject. One evening, as the shuttle drifted near a small, uninhabited planet, Marcus set the ship to orbit and allowed a brief rest period. Lyra sat near the observation window, staring at the swirling clouds below. "Your species values freedom," she said quietly. "But there are others who do not understand. They see power as ownership, as control. How will they react to you refusing what they consider a gift? We fight not to dominate, but to preserve what is ours and protect what is not. Freedom is not given, it is respected, and I will respect that even if others cannot." We act with purpose, guided by ethics, instinct, and experience. That is why we survive and why we thrive. Marcus saw potential in Lyra not only as an ally but as a bridge between species, someone who could understand and perhaps influence alien cultures with human ideals of freedom and choice. At one point, an alien fleet appeared on sensors, moving with precision and intent. Marcus assessed them carefully. They were not hostile yet, but they were watching, waiting for mistakes. He knew that the choices he and Lyra made now could determine the next stage of the galaxy's political balance. "We must be careful," Marcus said. "They are observing, testing. They expect fear, submission, or arrogance. We give them neither. We give them understanding, intelligence, and resolve. I will learn as we go." Instead, Marcus would show them the strength of human choice, the power of mutual respect, and the unyielding determination that defined his species. The shuttle pressed forward, past stars and through shadowed voids, carrying Marcus and Lyra together into the unknown. Each challenge they faced, each hazard they overcame, reinforced what he already knew. Humans were survivors, thinkers, and moral agents. And when combined with courage, intelligence, and respect for others, humanity's true power shone brightest, not in conquest but in choice. And so, as the stars stretched endlessly ahead, Marcus allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. He was not alone. He had an ally, a friend, and someone who could understand the human way. Together, they would face what came next, ready to demonstrate to the galaxy that humans were more than soldiers. They were a force defined by freedom, morality, and an indomitable spirit that no enemy could ever predict or control. The shuttle glided silently past the edge of the asteroid belt, its hull shimmering in the pale light of a distant sun. Marcus Vane sat in the pilot's seat, his eyes scanning the readouts, muscles tense but poised. Beside him, Lyra studied the star charts and sensor readings, her alien mind calculating trajectories, analyzing potential threats, and predicting outcomes with the precision of a supercomputer. For Marcus, it was both reassuring and unsettling. She was sharp, far sharper than many humans, yet she now worked with him as a partner, not a subordinate. Their mission had been simple in theory: deliver critical intelligence about alien fleet movements back to Earth. But the galaxy rarely honored simplicity. Word of Marcus's refusal to accept Lyra as a reward had spread. The alien coalition that had offered her as a gift was now watching closely, unsure how to respond to his defiance. Humans were unpredictable, and Marcus had proven that he would not bow to expectations. Lyra broke the silence, her voice calm yet curious. "Your species values choice above all, yet I sense that others, even within your own alliance, do not fully understand this. They expect obedience, not moral consideration." That is remarkable. This was the kind of situation where humans thrived, where unpredictability and cunning could overcome raw power. "We have company," he said evenly, his hands moving over the controls. "They're expecting us to panic. Let's give them a different story." Humans are unusual. The alien fleet expected direct confrontation, overwhelming force, and predictable human reactions. Marcus gave them none of that. He lured them through gravitational anomalies, forcing their ships to expend energy to maintain formation. He used the shuttle's agility to strike at weak points, exploiting patterns the aliens didn't even realize they displayed. Lyra's input was invaluable. She identified vulnerabilities in the enemy ships, predicted their maneuvers, and even suggested feints that a human alone might never have conceived. Together, they became more than a pilot and a passenger. They were a tactical unit, blending human unpredictability with alien precision. Hours passed in a tense, exhausting engagement. The alien fleet, frustrated by their inability to subdue a single shuttle, began to retreat, recalculating their strategy. Marcus allowed the shuttle to glide away, engines humming steadily as they left the battle behind. Lyra exhaled, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Your species is extraordinary. You do not simply react. You anticipate, you innovate." You survive not by power alone, but by understanding and adaptation. They would need to pass through a neutral system controlled by an alien race known for strict adherence to tradition and hierarchy. Marcus knew that any misstep could trigger political complications, but it also offered an opportunity. Humans were often underestimated in such systems because their ethics and strategies did not conform to expected patterns. As they entered the neutral system, Lyra's eyes narrowed. "They are watching," she said. "Sensors are picking up multiple monitoring vessels. They suspect you are carrying Lyra, and they do not approve. Let's show them that freedom is not a weakness." Their approach was precise but not hidden. They were not fleeing. They were demonstrating that human courage and morality would not be intimidated. Upon landing, they were met by representatives of the planet's governing council. They were formal, their expressions carefully neutral, but Marcus could sense the underlying tension. Lyra's presence was the cause. In their eyes, she was not a companion but a matter of protocol, tradition, and control. "You have brought her here," one of the officials said, voice measured. "She was gifted to you. She is our concern. Your refusal to accept her as a reward has already caused disruption among the allied species. Why should we not demand her return?" This was not behavior they understood. A human soldier who refused a gift that symbolized honor. It was audacious, but Marcus stood firm, unwavering. Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm and resolute. "I choose to be here," she said. "I am not a possession. I am a being with my own decisions. I stand with Marcus because I wish to, not because anyone forces me." The council had expected compliance, fear, or at least hesitation. Instead, they were faced with a display of autonomy and integrity, human and alien alike. The room shifted from tension to confusion. Marcus remained steady, allowing the silence to emphasize his point. "You see," Marcus continued, "the human approach is different. We do not measure worth by ownership. We measure it by respect, courage, and choice. That is why humanity survives. That is why we thrive." Marcus had won, not through violence, but through principle, through courage, through clarity of purpose. The shuttle remained on the planet's surface while Marcus and Lyra navigated the political minefield. They met with officials, explained their mission, and negotiated passage through controlled territories. Every interaction was an exercise in diplomacy, ethics, and strategic thinking. Marcus relied on human ingenuity, on reading intentions and predicting reactions, while Lyra provided insight into alien logic, translating cultural norms and detecting unspoken threats. During a quiet moment in the shuttle, Lyra spoke, her voice reflective. "You risked confrontation not with weapons but with ideas. That is unusual. Most species would have fled, complied, or fought. You confronted them with truth. It is effective. You value freedom above convenience, choice above obedience. That is rare. And now they're testing us." The coalition fleet tested, maneuvered, and waited for mistakes, but Marcus made none. Instead, he exploited their assumptions, using the shuttle's agility and Lyra's insight to create openings and mislead them. The fleet observed human strategy unfold in real time, witnessing ingenuity, adaptability, and calm under pressure. Hours passed. Eventually, the fleet disengaged, leaving Marcus and Lyra free to continue their journey. But the encounter was a reminder. Humans were feared not only for their strength, but for their unpredictability, morality, and courage. Other species could not control humans, could not easily anticipate their decisions, and certainly could not take what was not freely offered. That evening, as the shuttle drifted past a cluster of uninhabited moons, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He looked at Lyra, her alien features bathed in starlight, and realized that she had become more than an ally. She was a bridge between worlds, a living testament to the human values he held dear. Together, they had proven that freedom, choice, and courage could stand against intimidation, expectation, and tradition. Lyra spoke softly. "I am learning, human soldier. Your species' greatest weapon is not your fleets, not your weapons, but your principles. You survive because you stand for what you believe, not because you dominate. That is inspiring. And it's only the beginning. The galaxy is vast, full of dangers and full of opportunities. We will face them together, and we will prove that humanity's spirit cannot be controlled or broken. Yet Marcus felt a steady confidence, a quiet assurance that humans, guided by choice, courage, and intellect, could meet any obstacle. And with Lyra by his side, they represented a force not of conquest, but of respect, morality, and indomitable human spirit. The journey continued, the galaxy vast and uncharted, and Marcus knew that whatever came next, humanity would face it head-on. Not because they were the strongest, but because they were unyielding, clever, and true to their principles. And in that truth lay their greatest power. Marcus Vane felt the shuttle vibrate lightly beneath him, a subtle reminder that danger never truly slept in space. The galaxy had begun to take notice of his defiance. The coalition that had gifted Lyra to him was no longer content to watch from a distance. They had assembled a fleet, one calculated to intimidate and overwhelm, to remind humans of their place in the cosmic order. Marcus, however, did not feel fear. He felt determination, the same determination that had carried humans through countless wars, countless trials, and countless moments where survival seemed impossible. Lyra monitored the sensors beside him, her alien mind processing the incoming data with speed that rivaled the shuttle's systems. "They are large in number and heavily armed," she said, her glowing eyes fixed on the projections. "But their tactics are rigid. They do not anticipate unpredictability. They expect compliance, not creativity." Marcus had already devised a plan, one that relied not on brute force, but on strategy, improvisation, and human ingenuity. Lyra, impressed by his ability to anticipate and manipulate the enemy's assumptions, had offered her skills in energy manipulation and navigation. Together, they became more than a pilot and a passenger. They became a tactical unit capable of outsmarting a fleet far larger than themselves. As the alien ships closed in, Marcus activated the shuttle's cloaking systems. It was not perfect, but it would hide them long enough to reach a position that the enemy would not expect. Lyra's hands moved swiftly over the controls, recalibrating shields and sensors to make the shuttle appear as a harmless cargo vessel. The Coalition fleet scanned the region, their sensors picking up minor anomalies but missing the shuttle entirely. "They are confident," Marcus murmured. "They think the human is cornered." They always underestimate the value of intelligence over firepower. Marcus used the terrain to his advantage, leading the fleet into a narrow passage where their numbers became a liability rather than an asset. From within the shuttle, Lyra redirected energy from the shields to the engines at precise moments, allowing the vessel to dart through spaces that should have been impassable. Plasma beams from the alien ship struck asteroids, triggering controlled explosions that further obstructed their formation. Marcus's tactics were deliberate, using every element of the environment to create chaos for the enemy while keeping his shuttle safe. Hours passed as the shuttle maneuvered through this deadly obstacle course. The Coalition fleet struggled to maintain coordination, their rigidity a weakness Marcus exploited at every turn. Lyra suggested feints and misdirections, sometimes leading small groups of ships away from the main pursuit. The aliens did not anticipate such coordination between human improvisation and alien insight. Each success reinforced the human-alien bond, proving that cooperation and trust could overcome raw power. Finally, Marcus led the shuttle into a region of space with dense radiation clouds, an area the Coalition fleet avoided due to the risk of system failures. He activated a series of small drones, pre-programmed to emit false signals and decoys. The enemy fleet detected these signals and, believing them to be the shuttle, redirected their attack. Marcus took advantage of the distraction to slip away, leaving the Coalition fleet behind in confusion and frustration. Lyra exhaled, a sound of relief mixed with admiration. Your species' tactics are remarkable. You do not rely on strength alone. You anticipate, you manipulate, you innovate. That is why humans endure where others fail. Word of their defiance had spread, and other alien factions were now watching. Humans had proven that they were not to be underestimated, that they could defy expectation, and that they could protect what they valued most without compromise. Marcus knew that the next encounters would be more challenging, but he also knew that humans thrived under pressure, using intellect and moral clarity as weapons as much as any laser or plasma cannon. At one point, they approached a derelict station orbiting a dying star. Marcus decided to investigate, hoping to find resources and intelligence that could aid their mission. The station was abandoned, silent except for the hum of long-dead systems. As they docked, Lyra noted the structural weaknesses in the station's hull, pointing out areas where they could access old storage bays without triggering security failsafes. Inside, they found remnants of a long-forgotten conflict, data logs, supply caches, and automated defense systems still partially active. Marcus navigated carefully, disarming or avoiding traps with a combination of human intuition and Lyra's alien analytical skills. Each discovery provided valuable insight into past conflicts and strategies, knowledge they could apply to future engagements with the Coalition fleet or other hostile forces. Lyra examined one of the logs, her eyes glowing as she read the alien script. These records indicate that your species' approach to war is unique. Even in conflicts long past, humans employed unpredictability, creativity, and moral decision-making as tools. That is consistent with your behavior. That combination makes us unpredictable and often unbeatable. As they prepared to leave, an alarm suddenly triggered. The Coalition fleet had tracked their movements and was approaching faster than anticipated. Marcus's heart did not race. He had anticipated this. He guided the shuttle toward the station's automated defense systems, activating turrets and energy barriers remotely. The Coalition ships fired, but their attacks were blunted by the station's defenses, giving the shuttle a chance to escape. Lyra marveled at Marcus's calm under pressure. "You anticipated their pursuit," she said. "You prepared contingencies. Your species excels at planning under uncertainty. We survive because we plan, but we succeed because we adapt when plans fail. Flexibility is just as important as foresight." Lyra adjusted the shuttle's systems for maximum efficiency, ensuring they would survive the stresses of the jump. With a surge of energy, the shuttle accelerated toward the wormhole, the stars stretching into lines of light. The Coalition fleet attempted to follow but faltered, unable to match the unpredictable trajectory. Marcus and Lyra emerged in a distant system, safe for the moment, their hearts steady despite the challenges they had faced. Lyra looked at him, admiration clear in her expression. "Your species is extraordinary, not because of power but because of choice, courage, and intellect. That is why humans endure where others falter. The galaxy may try to intimidate, manipulate, or control us, but humans never give up. We fight for what is right, for freedom, and for each other. That is our greatest strength." Each encounter, each challenge, reinforced what Marcus already knew. Humans were not defined by the weapons they wielded or the fleets they commanded. They were defined by their principles, their courage, and their ability to act when others would hesitate. Lyra spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I am learning more than I expected. Your species does not rely on fear or domination. You rely on understanding, morality, and the willingness to act. That is powerful." And with Lyra by his side, they represented a force that others could not predict, could not control, and could not easily defeat. As the shuttle glided past a distant nebula, Marcus felt a surge of quiet pride. They had turned defiance into strategy, courage into survival, and freedom into a weapon more potent than any fleet. Humanity's principles, ingenuity, and resilience shone brightly in the darkness of space, a testament to what humans could achieve when they remained true to themselves. And Marcus knew that no matter what the Coalition or the galaxy threw at them next, humans would face it head-on, guided by their principles, their intellect, and their unyielding spirit. The future was uncertain, but the human spirit was unbreakable. Together, Marcus and Lyra continued onward, the galaxy stretching endlessly before them, full of danger, discovery, and the promise of proving that humanity's greatest weapon was not power, but the courage to stand for what was right. The stars stretched endlessly before Marcus Vane as the shuttle glided through the void. Ahead lay the Coalition fleet that had pursued him for weeks, determined to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. They had underestimated humanity, underestimated him, and underestimated the power of choice, courage, and ingenuity. Marcus knew that this confrontation would decide not only their immediate survival but also send a message across the galaxy. Humans could not be controlled or intimidated. Lyra sat beside him, calm but alert. Her glowing eyes scanned the fleet ahead, noting the composition of ships, weapon arrays, and energy shields. "They are prepared," she said softly. "They anticipate aggression, but they do not anticipate strategy beyond combat. You will have the advantage if you act wisely." Thousands of ships moved in precise formation, energy beams ready, engines humming with lethal potential. Most species would see the size and firepower and surrender. Marcus did not. Humans had faced impossible odds before, and they had prevailed. It was in their nature to endure, innovate, and strike where others thought impossible. He set the shuttle's course toward the heart of the formation, deliberately exposing them just enough to be noticed. The Coalition detected the approach and prepared to engage. Their assumption was that a single shuttle could not pose a serious threat to such a fleet. Marcus smiled faintly at the predictable arrogance. Lyra touched his arm. "They believe fear will control you. But fear is not part of your species' equation. You are unpredictable, and that frightens them more than weapons ever could. They measure power only in fleets and weapons, not in principle or ingenuity." The fleet fired at the decoys, wasting energy and resources, while Marcus guided the shuttle into unexpected positions among asteroid clusters and gas clouds. Lyra's alien insight complemented Marcus's human intuition perfectly. She identified weak points in the fleet's formation, suggesting pathways that exploited rigidity and reliance on conventional tactics. Marcus followed each suggestion, weaving the shuttle through impossible spaces and emerging unscathed at points where the enemy expected only destruction. Hours passed in tense maneuvering, the fleet growing frustrated and impatient. They expected humans to act with fear, to comply, to make mistakes. Marcus acted with precision and calm, turning their assumptions into a weapon against them. Each time the enemy regrouped, he had already moved, repositioned, or created another diversion. Finally, he led the shuttle to a strategic point near a gravitational anomaly, a natural formation of asteroids, debris, and unstable energy fields. The Coalition fleet attempted to follow, but Marcus had calculated every movement, every risk. He initiated a series of controlled energy bursts from the shuttle's systems, triggering chain reactions in the asteroid field that sent debris streaking through the enemy formation. Ships were disabled, forced to retreat, or destroyed by their own miscalculations. Marcus had turned their strength, their numbers, into a liability. Lyra's voice was steady but impressed. "You have taken their power and transformed it into weakness. That is, human ingenuity at its finest." He guided the shuttle into a position where energy fields could be manipulated to create artificial interference. Communication channels between enemy ships became unreliable, coordination broke down, and confusion spread through their ranks. Humans were masters of adapting to chaos. Marcus had created it deliberately. Finally, the Coalition commander attempted a direct approach, sending the most advanced vessels to overwhelm the shuttle. Marcus remained calm. He had prepared for this moment, relying on both human improvisation and Lyra's alien expertise. They executed synchronized maneuvers, using the gravitational anomalies, decoys, and shuttle agility to neutralize the threats. Lyra marveled at his skill. You anticipate not only the enemy's actions but their expectations. That is rare in any species. We never rely solely on force. We rely on intellect and courage as well. They had turned defiance into power, courage into advantage, and choice into victory. Once clear of immediate danger, Marcus set a course for a distant, human-controlled system. Lyra studied the stars outside the shuttle, reflecting on what they had accomplished. "Your species is extraordinary," she said softly. "You have demonstrated not only survival, but the power of principle and freedom. Other species fear force. Humans fear neither force nor principle. That is why your victories endure. It is not only about winning battles. It is about proving that freedom and principle matter more than fear and control." Lyra assisted with the docking procedures, her alien understanding of systems allowing them to optimize repairs efficiently. During their brief stay, Marcus shared their journey with the station's representatives, not as a boast, but as a lesson. Humans could face impossible odds, respect autonomy, and remain steadfast in principle. The message was clear. Humanity's power lay not in domination, but in integrity, intellect, and courage. Word of their journey spread quickly. Reports from scouts and sensors confirmed that Marcus and Lyra had turned defiance into strategic advantage, had survived overwhelming fleets, and had emerged stronger. Humans were now recognized not only for their strength but for their ingenuity, morality, and unpredictability. Other species began to reconsider assumptions about humanity, realizing that humans could not be controlled or subdued easily. Lyra reflected on everything she had learned. "I came as a gift, expecting to be a reward. Instead, I have witnessed what your species truly values: freedom. Choice, courage, integrity. That is what defines humans, not the battles they fight but the principles they uphold. That is what we bring to the universe, not just strength, but the spirit to endure, innovate, and inspire." The coalition had learned a lesson that would echo across the stars. Humans were unpredictable, unyielding, and unbreakable in spirit. Lyra sat quietly watching Marcus with a mixture of respect and admiration. "You have shown me that strength is not only in weapons, but in choices. Humans survive because they act with wisdom and courage. That is unparalleled." Every encounter, every danger, every decision had reinforced what Marcus already knew. Humans were defined not by weapons or fleets, but by their spirit, their integrity, and their unwavering commitment to what was right. And as they traveled onward, the galaxy began to take note. Humans were no longer just survivors. They were innovators, strategists, and moral leaders. They could inspire allies, intimidate enemies, and change the course of events not through fear, but through principle. Marcus and Lyra had demonstrated that humanity's greatest weapon was not power, but courage, intelligence, and the unbreakable spirit to act rightly in the face of adversity. The journey was far from over, but Marcus felt an unshakable confidence. Humans would continue to face threats, overcome challenges, and prove their worth, not only in battles but in the choices they made and the principles they upheld. The galaxy was vast, but humanity's spirit was limitless. Together, Marcus and Lyra moved forward, symbols of what humans could achieve when guided by courage, morality, and ingenuity. The stars stretched endlessly, full of danger and possibility, but the human spirit shone brighter than any fleet, any weapon, or any expectation. And for Marcus, that was enough. They had turned a challenge into triumph, a gift into a partnership, and defiance into legacy. Humanity had shown the galaxy that it could survive, endure, and inspire, not by dominating, but by standing for what was right, acting with intelligence, and refusing to yield to fear or expectation. The future awaited, vast and uncharted, but Marcus knew one thing with certainty. Wherever humans went, whatever challenges lay ahead, Their greatest power would always be their courage, their principle, and their unbreakable spirit. And in that truth, Marcus and Lyra moved forward, ready to meet whatever the galaxy could throw at them, confident that humanity would endure, inspire, and prevail.